Today, we touch upon Team Korea's fate at the 2026 FIFA World Cup before delving into public transit fare subsidies for seniors here in Seoul. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective. It's Friday, June 26th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. It's time for a weekly talk about the stories related to South Korea making social headlines. For more on this, I have independent journalist Kelly Kasulis Cho here in the studio. Kelly, it's great to have you here.
Happy to be here as always. Thanks.
I also have writer Colin Marshall with us. Colin, welcome back.
Glad to be back once again.
Right, Kelly, let's start with a recap of Team Korea's match against South Africa and the prospects ahead.
Yes, full disclaimer, I am not a sports person, so I can't say that I've been watching the World Cup too much beyond like some of the fun cultural phenomena that have come out of it. But my understanding is that South Africa won in the last match against South Korea 1-0. And now it's a question of whether or not South Korea will continue in the competition. I read some sports analyses that suggested that there's a high probability that Korea will compete again and that we'll know in a day or two on the 28th. But for me, what's been interesting about this is kind of seeing the elation that's been going on in Korea. It's been a really fun time to be here and absorb the atmosphere, be it like sports bars, seeing people interact and enjoy the games, and also kind of the cultural exchange that we see going on. Unlike the 2002 World Cup, right, that Koreans remember, we're experiencing this in an era of TikTok and Instagram Reels. So like, for instance, if you're not in the US, you're still in a way experiencing some cultural exchange there. So as an American, there's been a lot of camaraderie built between Japan and Texans, for example, that has been really funny, and I've really felt that, and you see that with South Korea and Mexico as well. So to the point about this game, I saw a lot of that elation kind of drop off the cliff this week with that loss. I don't have much stake in football, soccer, sports, but it's been interesting to kind of see like a national mood take up this country and see it actually not just on the internet and in these like parasocial relationships, but on the street. Like, it's been a long time since I've really felt a news event here, like in my day-to-day life on the street, like people reacting. I think the last time that I felt this way was maybe the 2018 Pyeongchang Olympics, or the martial law declaration, right? But even that felt less powerful and less ubiquitous. I feel like I can't escape the World Cup right now. And so even though I did not watch the game, I knew South Africa beat South Korea because you could see it on people's faces just on the bus and going around town, which
right.
I love, actually.
There was a lot of disappointment here, especially at the public watch party in Gwanghwamun Square. Colin, what were your takeaways from the match?
Well, there is one memory, I think, that will stick with me for years to come. I caught glimpses of the match yesterday while I was getting ready at home, then stepped out and was walking down the street to where I was going, and I passed a fried chicken place, and it was packed in the morning, and suddenly, as I'm passing, I hear this collective shout groan from all these, maybe 50 people inside this chicken place, and I knew, well, the game isn't going well. It was already 0-1 in South Africa's favor when I left home, and I thought, well, I guess they're not going to turn it around, even though I wasn't watching. But you can tell, as Kelly mentioned, from people's reactions, and that was a particularly strong one. But another image that will stay with me as a representative, I saw on social media this morning, and it was a photo of a 편의점, a convenience store door that said 홍명보 출입 금지, which is 홍명보 is forbidden to enter. Him being the coach of the South Korean team, and I take away as well that I would not want that job under any circumstances, to be the coach of the South Korean team in the World Cup, because no matter how well they do, any faults or losses will be put on you. And this is characteristic of South Korean political culture in a lot of ways. Whatever goes wrong is the fault of who's ever at the head of things or seen to be the head of things. And he may be. His explanations for his choice to, for example, not bring out Min early on was plausible, but not that, a bit flimsy as well. And scrutiny will be going on for years about what exactly went into his decisions and why the level of play had dropped so much. But I will say I'm glad I don't have his job. And I will also take away that this is, again, this is a situation where someone is always the lightning rod when things go sideways in Korea, and that is, we know who that lightning rod is.
All right. Meanwhile, Kelly, moving ahead, one day ahead of Team Korea's match against South Africa, Capital Seoul obtained the legal basis for bus fare subsidies for those aged 70 and above. Could you tell us a bit more about this development, its implications, and the public response?
Yeah, so the proposal at play right now is basically to either subsidize or make free the Seoul metropolitan bus system for people who are 70 and up. Currently, the subway is, I believe, free for those who are 65 and up. So I'm actually surprised that the bus system hasn't already been a part of this. And I've also been kind of surprised by the response. There's been a little bit of a negative reaction over this. People seem concerned with rising costs of maintaining these systems if we continue to subsidize or expand, I guess, free ridership for senior citizens. I think there's a few things to consider here. So over the years, I've written about Korea's transportation system compared to, say, Japan or the United States. And one thing I learned in that process is that one of the factors you have to look at is what percentage of the maintenance or the cost of operating a subway or bus system is actually funded by passenger fares, right? So if you look at South Korea, the bus system is about 60 to 70%, according to estimates, funded by people's literal fares paying for the system. That's actually incredibly high compared to a lot of parts of the world. So just as an example, the New York subway, the New York bus system, incredibly dense, right? We're talking about 8 to 10 million people in that city. About 20 to 25% of their system is actually funded by passenger fares. So the government and these like private entities are largely the ones who bear the cost burden there. In Korea, that's not the case. People are riding public transit so much that it almost completely pays for itself. And actually some estimates with some of the fare changes, like the bus system has, the fare has been increasing slowly over the years. Estimates suggest that it actually could be 75 to 80% that will be paid by passenger fares. So I guess when you're looking at a society where the population is aging and there's a certain burden being incurred by that, I wonder why we're talking about drawing the line on subsidizing a public transit system. I mean, we don't want more cars on the roads here. We certainly don't want older people driving in their twilight years. We don't need more fine dust and pollution being, put out into the air. And so why is it that this is where some people are drawing the line? Also, we're talking about a society where about half of the elderly are considered under the poverty line. It just seems like an odd thing to be talking about. I know that, the healthcare system, the cost of maintaining cities, all of these are major concerns as the population ages and there isn't enough of a labor force to subsidize the elderly. This just seems like a weird place to put this flag in terms of societal concerns about how we're going to pay for this. But that's just my opinion.
Right, and keeping that in mind then, Colin, how do you respond to concerns over the long-term feasibility of these transit fare subsidies, especially keeping in mind that Seoul is a greying city?
Yes, following up on what Kelly said, it is, I think, an issue that is a considerable issue, but also maybe a representation of something larger or larger anxieties. We have, as Kelly said, a subway system that is free for the elderly to ride. And that's been in place, I think, more than 20 years, that policy. And in that time has become a political third rail. No politician wants to touch the free subway rides for seniors, but all knowing that one day they're going to have to touch it. So just waiting to see who's the first to get zapped, I think, is what's going on there. But this could happen to other policies that are subsidies for the elderly or that are making certain services free, even if they're not bad policies in and of themselves. I think some people do get worried that, like, okay, the country is getting older and older on average, as you say. What's to stop the larger and larger proportion of the elderly from just voting themselves more and more things. There is a lot of discourse in the US where I'm from, where we're both from, about the economic advantages that older people, the older generations, have received or arrogated to themselves. And I think we've really only seen the beginning there of what people can do when you have a sort of generational class consciousness, and when it's time to really start voting themselves the benefits. We'll see what happens there. But in Korea, I think with the elderly getting more and more political power through sheer numbers, that's what causes a bit of trepidation. And as Kelly said, this is subsidizing bus rides and subway rides is not a bad thing in and of itself, but I think people do sense a slippery slope, for better or for worse, and the sense of can we manage not just the demographic change, but the political shifts in power that come with that. I think that's underlying all of this.
Right, and with regard to Korea's demographic portrait, findings for the month of April, Kelly, show a remarkable surge in the number of newborns. Could you tell us a bit more about this?
Well, not to temper the excitement, it is a remarkable surge when you think about a 17% increase in newborns year on year. But we're actually talking about 3,000 babies worth of a difference in a country of 50 million people. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's not that remarkable. I think part of the reason why so much attention is being paid to this is because it's been a really pessimistic narrative for a very, very long time about South Korea's birth rate and its decline. South Korea no longer has the lowest birth rate in the world. It has one of the lowest, so that's, I guess, an improvement. We don't really know what exactly is at play. So what we have seen is that more marriages have happened after the pandemic sort of wrapped up here because a lot of them were put on hold. In Korea specifically, child rearing is almost synonymous with getting married, so people usually don't do those things if they're not together. And so there might have been a delay in marriages because of the pandemic, and now we're seeing a surge of them, and therefore a surge of the number of people who are also having children. It's certainly an improvement, right? I don't know if the government subsidies and benefits, in fact, I think Colin, being a recent father, could speak to this more, are really enough to move the needle to change someone's mind from not having kids to having kids, right? The government support is certainly great. I just don't know if it's enough to change anyone's mind. The last time we did a story on this a couple of years ago, parents were really grateful for the help that they were getting, but right, it wasn't enough to make a difference between being a parent and not being a parent. It maybe made the decision a little bit easier, but those people were probably planning to have kids anyway. So whenever we see these headlines, I would just caution to not get too excited about month-to-month or year-on-year improvements. I think if we see this kind of sustained improvement over the course of, say, 5+ years, that's pretty exciting. Just to give an example, I think at its lowest, the birth rate was about 0.71 newborns per a woman that was capable of having children, or female capable of having children. I think it's like more around 0.79 or 0.81 now. So we're talking about a nominal improvement. And if Korea wants to replenish its population in a way that isn't worrisome, where people are not getting up in arms about subsidizing the elderly's bus fare, then we really need about 2.1 newborns for every female that is able to reproduce. So we're still quite a ways away.
Right. But for now, Korea's shift in trend with regard to its birth rate has been covered by the foreign media, including Canada's CBC News. Now, it titled the article, "South Korea's Unusual Approach to Boosting Its Birth Rate." For the sake of our viewers who may not be familiar with some of the measures that Kelly also alluded to, could you tell us about the measures that are in place here in the country, and would they work elsewhere?
Yes, this was a CBC News segment on TV and shot mostly in the city of Daegu, incidentally, which does have free bus fares for the elderly. I believe they have that policy, but also they have a variety of programs in place to encourage reproduction. One of them, the one this segment focused on, was a speed dating service marshaled by the city itself. And so they brought out this couple who had got together based on meeting through this service. And of course, they rattled down the usual list of the money given out, the financial support, especially highlighting IVF. I didn't know. Apparently, you can get 25 rounds of IVF paid for per child, which is, if it's going to work for you, it's going to work within 25 rounds. but also at different levels, be it the country or the city. Also, companies have certain policies in place to incentivize marriage, not just child rearing, but marriage itself. But of course, as Kelly alluded to, there were also couples brought out with these similar, not necessarily complaints, but concerns that, yes, the money's nice, but it's not enough. Maybe there could be more acceptance of maternity leave, although some of this points to the problem of one salary not being enough to raise a family on. I mean, there's a problem causing that to be the case, and it's a much harder problem to deal with. But as you say, this was CBC, and Canada is also, like most developed countries, coming up against its own demographic problems. The birth rate is at its lowest ever, as this segment said. But Canada is also a high immigration country, to put it mildly, and they haven't had to think as much about this because of that. But if any country is going to show what problems can arise because of a high immigration policy, Canada will do that. Much like if any country is going to show what low immigration can cause, it'll be South Korea. So I think there are some, not necessarily parallels, but lessons one country can have for the other in that regard, unlikely though it may seem.
Right. Meanwhile, Kelly, we have time for one more story before we end today. Back on Monday this week, Starbucks stores here in South Korea closed doors at 3 o'clock in the afternoon for a history lecture. Do tell us why.
Well, for those who don't know the history, the two dominating narratives that came out of Korean history in the 80s was the society economically transformed. That was really the flipping point from a country that struggled with post-war poverty to a country that's a major manufacturer and player. The other is Korea's struggle for democracy and the fight against authoritarianism. So the Gwangju Uprising, also known as the Gwangju Massacre, was a day in the 80s where military forces clashed with civilians. It was almost like a mini war or a mini battle. 165 civilians were killed. There are a lot of great films about this if you want to see a dramatization of that, maybe Peppermint Candy for those who are interested in Korean films. But anyway, so I think this history is actually well understood here. And what happened was, to mark, I guess, that anniversary, Starbucks did this reusable cup promotion, and they used the phrase Tank Day. And it really didn't go over well. It was seen as making light of a really horrible and tragic moment that is a recent part of Korean history. I mean, I myself have gone down to Gwangju on the anniversary of the massacre and have seen the families of these people who were slain still crying over their loved ones' graves. Okay, so this is very fresh. The martial law declaration also kind of brought back some of these pains. And I was there that night at the National Assembly when former President Yoon tried to use kind of a military dictatorship era law to wrestle control of the country. And there were a lot of young people that ran down there in the middle of the night because they remembered this history and they wanted to see this through and stand up against that. So I don't think the average Korean person doesn't know about this. What I think happened was there was kind of a tone-deaf mistake made at the very highest levels of Starbucks corporate offices. They fired the chairman, the executive chairman, the same day that this happened. And the company has suffered such damage to its reputation that it's now trying to save face and virtue signal by making all of its baristas and its corporate employees go to a 3-hour training, right? So I don't, this is just my opinion. I don't know if the people that had to go to that training are the people that are truly responsible for this poor signaling, but I do think it's unfortunately something that they're going to have to suffer through for the sake of trying to save face and improve the brand. And here in South Korea, it has had a major impact. There have been reports of sales dropping significantly in the aftermath of this, people smashing their Starbucks cups. And for anyone who's from the United States, I know that Starbucks is a Seattle company, but actually South Korea has the most Starbucks per capita in the world. So Starbucks is in many ways a Korean company, right? So this was a very unfortunate mistake.
Right. Colin, the public response to this latest effort by Starbucks Korea, it was mixed. Could you very briefly tell us about it?
Yes, there's no underestimating Starbucks as an institution here in Korea, but if you read between the lines of many of these stories, they reveal that many ordinary Starbucks consumers here in Korea were not very well aware of what had happened in with this whole promotion and its reaction. And in a lot of ways, this has been playing out among higher profile political actors. And I think none of them have come out looking good out of this incident. I mean, it is not, this campaign was not tasteful, of course. It is also not tasteful to use it as an opportunity to score political points against your opponents. And, you know, it's also not very tasteful to have the police investigating a company under suspicion of insulting the revolution. I mean, South Korea has long aspired to join a league of modern democracies, and that's not the kind of thing that happens in those countries. And so I think this might be an occasion for self-reflection, but not the kind of self-reflection that's actually been going on.
Right, I take the idea for self-reflection then. All right, Colin, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts today.
Thank you.
Kelly, thank you very much for your insights.
Thanks for having me.
That is all the time we have for this week then. Have a great weekend. See you back here, same time next Monday.